Hello. The topic this time is India. What about India? And in particular, what about India compared to China? India is a country whose population will exceed China very soon. It is still growing faster than China is in terms of its population. And its economy is also starting to grow and will probably grow faster than China because of its larger population. But India right now has a number of challenges and opportunities that are worth exploring. So the first thing I would say about India, and particularly compares to China, is that the infrastructure in India is way behind that of China. China has invested huge amounts of money and energy into building roads, plumbing, clean water, transportation, factories, modernizing its economy. India is still way behind in that regards. It is very, very difficult to create a modern economy if you try to leapfrog over the industrial age. India has been primarily an agricultural country, and so it is, I think, impossible to leapfrog from being agricultural to being high-tech without going through industrialization. And right now, India is sort of on the path to industrialize very, very heavily, and is still doing the kind of work that China did a decade ago. So in that respect, India is at least a decade behind China in trying to upgrade its infrastructure with basic industrial scale network of roads, plumbing, sewage, water delivery, transportation. And a lot of the technology and a lot of the startups in India, a lot of the money to be made are going to be made in that area. Even the high-tech internet companies in India that are succeeding tend to be those that are delivering and giving goods and services that are kind of in the basic human need category, like transportation apps or food delivery apps. Unlike, say, China, which is doing drones and robots. India will get to that, but I think it's going to be at least a decade away. There's another difference between India and China, which is that China has had vast urbanization, moving hundreds of millions of people from the country into urban neighborhoods. India is still way behind in that migration. They have only a few top cities that have a lot of people, and they don't have that hundreds of tier 2, tier 3 cities that China has with millions and millions of people. So they're still in that process of that migration into urbanization. And so there's a higher or larger divide between the urban city dwellers and the countryside. And that urban city divide is, again, something that they will catch up on, but are way behind right now China. It also means, by the way, that the areas that India are lagging behind China are huge areas of opportunity for those in India who want to have businesses and to create wealth. There's another couple of reasons why India is a little bit behind China, and that is that it has a famously bureaucratic overload. It is somewhat left over from the time of the British, but it is terribly bureaucratic in a way that's really hard to appreciate. And they have, I think, some taxation structures that are disincentives to entrepreneurs and startups. And both of these things will take time to cure, but they are a hindrance right now for that kind of the rise of India. It needs to overcome even more bureaucratic and corruption that is endemic into this system. And so China, again, has overcome this much more rapidly and has had at least another extra decade to do so. There's a one-third difference between China and India, and that is that China economy and the China interest in research and development have paid a lot of attention to hardware, to things that are physical, to material science, to making actual physical items to sell. And so there's a lot of expertise in China in the hardware, in the factories, in the manufacturing of things. And China has only recently sort of really kind of stretched into trying to create software. Of course, I believe in the Mark Andreessen statement that software will eat the world, that basically many of the services and that the tangible products that we make will be substituted by less material and more software. So many things that we want to do, like say in a camera, that used to be done by heavy glass, starts to be the same service, the same effect, the same action is actually going to be not done with glass and atoms, but done by bits. So you replace the glass with software, with chips, and you have computational photography. So this is a way in which software eats the world. More and more of the physical things that we used to do and needed lots of atoms, a lot of matter, something heavy to do, can be done with less and less material and more bits. The bits, if you have them powerful enough, if you have enough of them, if you have the right intelligence, can do things that we could only do before with heavy materials. So there's this dematerialization where we can do more with less atoms. And so there is this long-term shift in the economy from materials, doing things with atoms, physical things, to doing things with software, with computation, with bits and chips. And that is lighter and less material. And it is also a wholly different way of doing things. It requires new skills, new ways of understanding new business models. But in the end, I think software does eat everything. Computation will take over more and more of the things that we find valuable. Okay? And the Indians have had a long tradition of working with mathematics and software. And so they have a good advantage in understanding and excelling in creating software. They have less of a expertise collectively in hardware and materials. I think you kind of need to do both, because even though we reduce the amount of materials that we use, all software needs to run on some hardware somewhere. So you can't completely divorce the bits from the atoms. It's really, you need both together, integrated. And people like, or companies like Apple show the fact that integration is very useful and very valuable. So what India needs to do to kind of compete on the global stage, to compete at the level that China is to continually to grow in their ability to do hardware, to make physical things that are integrated with software and chips. And right now, they have a great facility and great expertise and great history with software, and less so with hardware. China, it may be kind of really the flip. China has really been really good at understanding and doing and manufacturing and creating physical things, and has begun to exercise this other side of the software and computation, because actually you need to have both done excellently in order to do the best products in the world. So there are some cultural advantages that India has compared to China in competing on the world stage, in becoming a global producer. And that is that India is a hugely diverse place, more diverse than China is. And they also have a several century tradition of being familiar with English, using English as a native language. And they've worked with a diaspora of Indians all over the world in a network. So they've become really good at catering to a diverse culture. And I think that's an essential ingredient in being a global power, is understanding the plurality of cultures and being able to cater to that and to be able to export what you're doing culturally around the world. Things like Bollywood would be a good example. And so India has a head start in that direction of being kind of culturally primed to be a global power. And I think that's one of the advantages that they have from their history. So we could think of the huge 1 billion plus 1.5 billion Indians and almost as many Chinese as really becoming competitors in the future, two giant countries with giant workforces and giant ambitions. But there's also the possibility that just as the US and China have had many decades of working together in partners, where things were in the past designed in the US and manufactured in China and we needed each other, we're now kind of figuring out a new relationship with the US and China. There also could be a relationship of China and India, where they are partners in creating things. Perhaps the Indians, good with software, Chinese still command an excellence in manufacturing, and together they can actually produce things that nobody else could, things that everybody in the world would want. So I can imagine a way in which the qualities and the talents of these two giant countries might be complementary, and that rather than the Chinese and the Indians seeing each other as competitors, they might be able to see each other as partners, and they could actually engage in this in a very formal way, in cross investments, cross fertilization of workers and ideas, of people who are traveling between the two countries. So I don't think it's necessary to imagine the rise of these two giants as necessarily being adversarial. I would like to imagine ways in which they could team up to really make things that could not be made in any other way unless you have these two giants cooperating with each other. So I think, in short, that's going to be decades away. I think, to reiterate, to summarize, India is at least a decade or more behind China. It will continue to accelerate, but it first needs to complete this infrastructural revolution of making basic things like roads, railways, airports, waterworks, sewage, clean water, and basic education that's universal and mandated. And that is going to take at least another decade or so to do. Because while India would like to leapfrog right into the future, the history suggests that that's not possible. The history of even in places like Africa, where we try to bring in the high-tech, solar-powered internet connection without building roads and things, they just don't survive. You actually need to have the basic industrial infrastructure in order to support a digital economy. You can't just overlay digital economy over the agricultural age. It just doesn't take. And so that intermediate step of going through the entire industrialization process is something that India still needs to do and is about to do. It's something that China has been doing already, and so it's going to be behind China for at least a decade. After that, we'll see how fast they can race forward. But I think they may have a slightly different path, which I think is good for the world and good for them, because it means that you can make a complementary duo partnerships in making new and great things for the world. So that's my summary about where I think India is, in particular in relationship to China. So thank you.